Hi, and welcome to Belated Binge Harry Potter, the re-binge podcast that doesn't take itself or the books too seriously. I'm Zach, your host, revisiting some of the most iconic series in recent memory that I nearly missed, like Harry Potter. Well, I didn't read till I was in like my mid-20s, despite the fact that I grew up with this series as a part of pop culture my whole life. I'm going to try something a little bit different on today's episode. So, I'm going to be honest with you. It seems like the Harry Potter chapter episodes are starting to maybe get a little stale for the audience here. So, what I thought I'd do is try a topic. And this topic is pretty much out there and has been touched from a bunch of different angles. So, I thought I would give you my angle as well. And that is the recently announced, confirmed Harry Potter TV series. I'm going to give you my thoughts, how it could work, and why it won't.
The Belated Binge Podcast.
All right, before we get into it, this podcast will have spoilers. Seriously, if you haven't read these books by now or seen the movies, you're even later than I was. As I mentioned, I'm going to try something a little bit different in this one. We're not going to be recapping a chapter of the book. We're going to take a slight little break from the chapter episodes for now. It seems like maybe maybe the audience is hoping for something a little bit different here for a bit. Also trying video, if you hadn't noticed. So if you're watching on YouTube, I've tried video in the past. I tried to make this a video podcast early on, and it became a lot to maintain for the time, and it wasn't giving me quite the. I didn't quite have the presence, I guess, on YouTube to justify the video, to be honest with you. But since I am making videos for YouTube with Harry Potter content, I thought, why not flip the camera on for this episode and let you see my face if you want to. If not, there's still an audio version that's available on all of the major podcast platforms. Shout out real quick before I get too far into this to Alex and Katie, the Bonus Binge Squad over on Patreon. Patreon.com/belatedbinge can get you early access to the episode as well as bonus episodes. I also try to put all the videos that I've been doing. I try to put them there first as well, so you get an early peek at all of that. Let me know your thoughts, and obviously, if you have some thoughts as to video content that you would like for those skits that I've been doing, would welcome them here as well as over on Patreon. So you can check that out, and that's all I'm going to plug for right now. We're doing this one slightly different too. This one's it's almost like one of my bonus episode series that I do for Patreon. Another shameless plug, I guess, that wasn't planned. And that's kind of the point. This episode's not going to be quite as planned out as the chapter episodes. Obviously, the chapter episodes, there's extensive note taking because I got to remember what happened in the chapter to be able to review it with you and recite it, give my thoughts, try to mix in a little bit of humor and my reactions and do some of the deep dive stuff. So that takes quite a bit of note taking. And so the episodes end up being fairly scripted most of the time when that is the topic that we're going to be covering. This one, not so much. This is going to be a little bit more like my Behind the Mic series that is completely off the top of my head when I do those for patrons. This one's not going to be quite that freestyled, but I've just got some general, ideas that I'm going to kind of talk through, and we're going to do it a little bit on the fly, I guess, as it relates to the new Harry Potter TV series that it's out there. It's been out there now. A lot of people have done their live reactions to it, whether that be on social media or podcasts that are more news focused or recent topic focused, I guess you could say. I don't know. I'm talking about like the Muggle casts of the world, where they are, kind of the uh, what do they call themselves? The weekly ride into the Wizarding World fandom, and um, I know they've covered this. I know a lot of other podcasts have covered this in different forms and fashions. I know some YouTube creators have covered this. And so you might ask, why the heck am I? And well, I figured it was my turn, I guess. And I actually did my reactions for patrons in the moment. So they got my like, kind of right as the news broke. I basically just pulled my phone out and started talking to them. Now I've had some time with it. I've had some time with the fandom in to kind of see what the reactions have been. And I thought, why not do an actual episode for the main feed about the TV series and kind of go through it like this? This is what I figure. I'll give you my basic initial reaction to it. And then I'm going to tell you how I think it could work really well. And then I'm going to tell you why it's not going to. So let's get into that. My basic initial reaction was somewhat mixed, to be honest with you. But all in all, positive. Like, I came to the Potter fandom late. That's kind of the whole point of the podcast. It's called Belated Binge for a reason, because I was very belated when I came around to the Harry Potter books. I grew up with this series. I was almost the exact same age as what Harry was in the movie canon my whole life, because like, my age has only changed but like, that's how age works. It If the joke didn't land, I'm sorry. But I I grew up with it. I didn't read it. I've talked about that on the podcast in the past, why, some of the reasons why I didn't read it, but I didn't read it. And I didn't finally read it until I was like 25, 26 years old. I was my early days in my professional career and all of that. Like I was the definition of a grown man reading this book series when I finally went through it, and cover to cover, first book all the way to the last book. And by cover to cover, I mean I listened to the audiobooks because I'm not a big reader. I actually, never mind, it doesn't matter. You don't care how much I actually read words printed on paper, because that still happens if you didn't know that. So I was late to this. And when I got done with it, what do you think I wanted? I wanted more Potter. And I saw the movies, and I like watched the movies through a different lens, because I had seen some of the movies, or at least parts of some of the movies and bits and pieces and stuff like that, because I was alive when when the series came out. But I saw them through a different lens, and I gotta be honest with you, while I find them enjoyable to sit and watch as movies, I find them very disappointing in a lot of ways, because some of my favorite stuff from the books was not included. And I think that they were very, very important things that were not included into the movies. And I think um, some of the decisions that were made on things to add to the movies instead, like I totally understand cutting things out of movies. That's going to happen because you can't fit a 7 books into 7 or 8 movies. Like, it's not going to work that way. You could break every single book into 2 movies and you're still going to have to cut some stuff out. Like, I totally get that. It was the fact that they cut things that were essential to understanding the plot moving forward, through the end of the movies, and then they had to replace it with kind of silly movieisms that didn't take place in the book, or like they had to clean they essentially had to clean up their mess because they didn't put in very important bits of information into the movies, so you wouldn't know it when it became important later. um like, I don't know, all of Voldemort's backstory and all of those memories, and Harry and Dumbledore actually talking about what objects they believed the Horcruxes to be, kind of important to how the book ends, but not included at all in the sixth movie. So what you end up with in the seventh movie is them just kind of like wandering around aimlessly, getting just plot convenience dropped into their laps, and then a weird ear ringing, tingling spidey sense when Harry gets near a Horcrux and goes, "Oh hey, that cup thing must be the thing." Sure. Like, and they had no idea that it might have to do with the founders of Hogwarts, which is a conversation that he and Dumbledore had many times in the sixth book. Didn't happen in the movie. So what does he get? He gets this like weird image in his mind's eye of the Gray Lady for no reason, and like a flag or something for Raven. Like, it was just, they had to shoehorn stuff in because of what they left out. And then they also made additions to the movies that just did not need to be there. And they could have not done some of that stuff, like burning down the burrow, and using that time to do the important stuff that they cut out, or at least some of it, montages of it, bits of it, nuggets of it, something that makes things make sense that they decided not to do. And that was actually the inspiration behind the topics of these videos that I've been doing for YouTube, and I post them on like in short form for like the TikToks and the Instagram Reels and stuff. I've put them on in YouTube Shorts, but it seems as though YouTube hates them so much because nobody is seeing the shorts versions. Um, but yeah, that's kind of the I took some inspiration from some other creators that I've seen do sort of that like producer writer dynamic, and shout out to them for the brilliance of what that's been. The big one that I'm most people probably know is pitch meeting. And I've done my best to not just like emulate that, but like, that's so hysterical. And I thought that that general concept really, really fit well into the movie decisions that were made in Harry Potter. And I just thought, why not? Why not give it a shot? And so that's what those videos are spawned from. And there's more coming down the pike as well. And this isn't that this tangent wasn't meant to be to promote those videos, but it actually has a lot to do with my reaction to the TV series, and why I think a TV series would be kind of fantastic for adapting the books. Especially, the announcement or whatever included that it's going to be a season per book. And I think you're still going to run into some stuff that you aren't going to be able to include from the books, because I still, unless the seasons are really longer than what you probably are going to be able to get out of this, you're still going to have to streamline some things, and I still think that's fine. I think that that still lends itself really well to telling more of the story and adapting it in a more true to the story way, that even if people didn't read the books at all, they would be able to sit down, watch the TV series, binge it, if you will, and understand what's happening and not ask stupid questions like I was asking the whole time I was watching those movies when I hadn't read the books, which is literally why I ended up reading the books, because my wife got tired of me asking those questions. Like, why? What is this? She's like, you wouldn't understand because you didn't read the books. It makes sense in the books, and it was better in the books. And I was like, all right, fine. I guess I'll read the books. So yeah, now I have a podcast. Anyways, I think that's one major thing that the TV series has at its disposal, and I think that while I say that in um in that it can be more true to the events as they take place in the books on screen than what the movies were able to do. I still think there's an opportunity to breathe new content into it. And so I'm going to talk about that as I talk a little bit more about why, like how I think the series could really work. But that was kind of my initial reaction. I know that there's obviously the JK of it all, and I I think that's going to be a major factor in how the TV series is received and how it does. Um, but my initial reaction to that as well is um, seeing that they brought her on as a producer, and that was the extent of the announcement. I think could be positive for the fandom in that one. I think it's completely unrealistic to think that there is a single shred, a bit of like real Harry Potter content, like sanctioned Harry Potter content. I don't want to say real because there's some really good like fan stuff out there, but that stuff is not sanctioned. Um, and somebody like the there can't be a big profit made off of that stuff. You know what I mean? Like a big project, real like professional and I keep going back to the word sanctioned Harry Potter content, new content in that way is gonna have to run through the creator of the Harry Potter series. Like they're gonna take their cut. That's just how it is gonna have to be. Um, but I think that the title of producer suggests that it has the potential to be less hands-on. We saw with the Fantastic Beasts series that writing for film wasn't the strength. Those movies got really messy really quickly after the first movie, which was actually pretty good. They kind of went downhill from there storyline wise, and it's in so writing for screen doesn't seem to be a particular strength. Um, but I think there's going to be like TV writers involved, and I think there's going to be an executive producer, a showrunner, that is not the author herself. I think it's highly possible that that producer title is really just the permission and the contractual obligation to include, but the writing is already done as the source material. The books are already written. That story already exists. That story is what has been beloved for literally decades, to the point where people are still talking about it, still creating about it. It's still a huge like fandom online. And while it has become different than what it was, perhaps in its heyday, if you will, it's still very much in existence. And we'll talk more about the fandom later in this episode as well. But I mean, it's been 20 years, and this thing is like we're still here. We're still doing this stuff. So there's obviously still an appetite for this original series, and that original series is written. So technically, shouldn't have to write a thing. She already did that. It has the opportunity for it to be the contractual obligation and the ability to give the stamp of approval, as long as the showrunner does the original material justice. It's possible that there's not that much involvement. Now, it's also possible that there's a ton of involvement. Obviously I don't know anything. I'm not an insider. Like have a I don't have sources and that are telling me that it's just a silent partnership that's going to get them paid. I don't know, but it at least suggests that the door is open for that to possibly be the outcome here, which I think could possibly be the best case scenario within the fandom right now. And that's kind of I guess that's kind of my hope. and that kind of wraps up what my just like initial gut reactions just to the TV series being announced is kind of like, for me personally, like I welcome new Potter content, but I know that it's complicated. And that's just kind of where I live with it. And I know that there are definitely people who I rightfully so feel a lot stronger than I personally do, based on just where my involvement um in the fandom, and just my being as a person. So yeah, it's it and to wrap it up, I think that was pretty like I'm excited for the opportunity to see new Potter content, and a fresh take on the series in a new medium that I think lends itself much better on the screen than movies do. But I acknowledge how complicated it is to make that happen, with the troublesome at best and completely toxic relationship at worst, that the creator of the series has with the fandom itself. So that's kind of where my initial reaction went. So now I kind of want to talk about the what I how I think this could really work. Right. So this is the optimistic look. This is the optimistic view. This is how I think the TV series could really, really nail it, honestly. And for me, it is, um, one, going back to the source material, I think is a safe play, to a certain extent. But I also think it's an attempt to reestablish some value in the franchise, given kind of the tumultuous place that it's in right now with the fandom. So I think recreating the story everyone loved in the first place it's kind of their only quote unquote safe option that they have. Um, and I think they can, if they do it right, I think it can really land for not only the current fandom that is open to watching it, um, but also to new viewers who may be getting introduced to the fandom for the first time. Um, I think the thing that I think would be really cool is if the series was the same story, but it mixes in different perspectives. So rather than like the books being told and written essentially through Harry's perspective, and everything we see being what he sees, I think it would be really cool if it was shot from multiple characters' perspectives throughout, and allowing us to see things that we know were happening at a given time, but were happening off page, or that we kind of hear about later, or that we have to speculate kind of how that went, sort of thing. Um, an example of this that I think I pulled for those just initial episodes I was doing for Patreon is like, imagine the opening, see the pilot episode, right? The chapter of the book is, life of Vernon Dursley through his perspective, weird people in cloaks acting kind of strange. And then it cuts to where the movies decided to introduce the story with Dumbledore, coming on to Privet Drive. He meets up with Professor McGonagall, and they start talking. And they actually, in the books, really talk about a lot of information. They talk about Voldemort, being gone. They talk about James and Lily. They talk about Hagrid. They talk about a lot before Hagrid shows up with baby Harry. He gets left on the doorstep. Bam, bada, boom. But we know that there's more happening in this, like, based on what Dumbledore and McGonagall are talking about, and later books establish what was actually going on in that precise moment. Like, I think that first episode could be really cool if you get some, maybe you get some flashes of Vernon Dursley's day, kind of introducing that, almost just a few cuts of that, you and then you really focus on Dumbledore, maybe telling as he's telling Professor McGonagall the story of what happened with Voldemort and stuff like that. Maybe we're seeing it. I've also seen it suggested, and I'd be open to this too, if the series actually opened with Voldemort showing up at Godric's Hollow and killing the Potters, and we see it take place. I think that could be really cool. If that's how they chose to do it, I would be open to that because again, it still follows exactly what happened in the books, just from a different angle, a different perspective. And I think it'd be cool if either through Dumbledore telling McGonagall, we get flashes and we get to actually see it visually, or if you show it actually happening, like if that's what you open with. Um, Either way, I think that would be to me a welcomed opening to the uh, the series, and I think the way that I would really like to see that take place. Sorry, I know this looks so silly, but there was like a bug crawling on my desk, and I found something flat that I thought I could smush it with, and I don't know if I was successful. It might just be on my clothes now. Anyways, the like here's a practical example. So say either through the conversation that Dumbledore and McGonagall are having, or just flat out opening on this, and it's the main content of the scene. Either way, I'm good. But we see Voldemort show up at Godric's Hollow. We see him take out the Potters. We see his reaction, and we see the blowback. We see him disappear. We see baby Harry in the crib, like crying or whatever. And we get more of the story. We see Hagrid show up to pick him up, and maybe we see some flashes of that missing 24 hours that the fandom has been really, really bugging about for 20 years, wanting to know what happened in that 24-hour period between when the Potters were killed and Hagrid shows up with Harry literally 24 hours later on Privet Drive. So you could show some of that. You could also show at this very same time Sirius and Hagrid, Sirius giving him the motorcycle. You could show Sirius taking off, trying to get to Peter Pettigrew. You could see that altercation. You could see Sirius being arrested and kind of like laughing in the hysteria of it all. You could see all of that happening in that first episode, and it could be a really cool way to open it and be like, yeah, this is the events that took place at this time, but we are showing them to you in a completely different way while still being true to the story as it took place. And that's one, obviously that's one scenario where you could see that play out, and you wouldn't have to. It could be done in cool ways where it's almost cuts and flashes a little bit. It doesn't necessarily have to be like a full episode of this, and therefore you have to cut stuff out from what was actually written down in the page in a later episode because you use time on this kind of thing. I think, again, if done properly, or I guess if executed well, that could really pop, in my opinion, for the current fandom, that, like I said, is open to a new TV series, giving them something, giving them a new way to take in the story that they already know. And um, that's kind of my thoughts on a really cool way that they could tell the story through the series, and I think that could really work. Another thing that I think could really work from it is if it is going well. I think you have so many spin-off opportunities with it that could be executed into other TV series or miniseries, that are the things that I think a lot of the fandom has been clamoring for and that they're not getting with this. I think this could lead to it in a really cool way, in a really, like, a really fleshed out way. So, for instance, you could start a Marauder series at the point in season 3 when the Marauder story is introduced. Whether I've heard people suggest that one already. I've heard them suggest that maybe one of the episodes is like a full flashback episode, and you're showing the Marauders, and ultimately what you're doing is that flashback episode is the pilot for the Marauders series, and I think that's a cool option to do. I don't necessarily know that that would be the way I would necessarily execute it because again, I think even in series form, you're going to be losing a lot from the book story already, and I think that the way that they can do this, be true to the books while still introducing new things, is a bit more short, like inclusions in different angles throughout the episodes. So I think it's probably more like the Shrieking Shack episode has like a small chunk of it that is a flashback for them, and that can be the catalyst for what leads into the pilot of the Marauders spin-off series. And that's not the only one. Like I said, I know that one's been suggested before, so it's not really, you're not getting something breaking new, new idea, big shiny thing here, but I do have other ideas. um, in that same vein, you can spin off. There's so many spin-offs you can do. You can spin off a Voldemort origin story from the memory episodes in season 6. You can start a Dumbledore spin-off story from the Life and Lies of Albus Dumbledore book episode in season 7. You can continue the story of the trio and like bridge the gap and even continue through Cursed Child if you want to after season 7. As much as I can't stand the story of Cursed Child, like I know that I have a feeling they really want to make that movie. You could use the TV series to kind of like bridge the end of the book series to the point where a Cursed Child happens, then the movie happens, and then kind of go wherever you want from there. I think you can do that from the end of season 7. I think you can even I know a lot of people have clamored for a Founders series or like a Founders mini series at the least. And I think you could do that at a couple of cool points throughout. And I think it would be centered around the Sorting Hat. I'm thinking maybe, I think it's book 5, so it would be season 5. I think, isn't that like the Sorting Hat's warning one, if I'm not mistaken? So where I think that's one where he does do a pretty extensive explanation of the founders and the houses and stuff in that one, and I think that would be a really good one to then, like I said, spin off like a mini series or a founders series, and I think that is a really, I think it's a really cool opportunity. I really do. I think if there are enough people interested in seeing Harry Potter TV content, I think if they were to execute that the way I just described, I think it could really, really work. I don't know if it'd be Game of Thrones. I don't know if it would be The Office. I don't know if it would be Sopranos in terms of just like how big it could possibly be, but I think it could be really, really good. And I think if they do this really, really well, then the audience is going to come. At least enough of the audience is going to come because this fandom is still so big and there are still so many people that fall within it that want to see new stuff. There is. Um, there's going to be a section that isn't. That's that is going to take place, and honestly, that's okay that that is the case. Um, I I I personally do not blame anyone who is just not interested in doing it anymore, and because of what's been happening with the author in of the series and the stuff that she's been saying on Twitter, about the transgender community. And like, I get it. If you are out, I am I support you being out. I'm just saying I think there are probably still enough people that would be in that it could be successful again if executed um, in a really solid and intriguing way. If they just play it like totally safe and the acting falls flat and the casting isn't that good, it's not shot that well, the special effects aren't that good. Like if it's not that good, it's not going to it's not going to hit. But if it's really good, it's going to hit. I think it is. But it's got to be really good. And I think what I just explained, or the idea I just put forth, I think that could be really good if they did it. So that's how I think it could work. But I don't think it will. And this is why. This is why I don't think it's going to work. And it all pretty much comes down to, we've talked about the situation with the author, and I think that has just poured just an insane amount of fuel onto a toxic dumpster fire that I feel this fandom is right now. It is so like divided and just the only word I can ever think to describe it right now is toxic. There are still lots of good people in the fandom that either want new Harry Potter content or they don't. Um, and they're still good people and they don't yell at people online. But like, it's the internet. People yell at each other online. That's what they do, and it is loud, very loud right now. And I don't see it getting quieter with the TV series. Get it like when it gets started. I think that every casting announcement that's made is just going to be ripped to shreds by people who wanted somebody else, or I can't believe you think that this person could do it, or if this I can't believe you're not casting Dan, Emma, and Rupert. It's like, yeah, cuz like they don't wanna, and they're not 11 anymore. um I do think, side tangent that I didn't mention earlier with what I think could be really good in the TV series is I do think that you have some of the previous cast that would be interested and open to parts in this TV series. Obviously, they can't, in most of the cases, they're not going to be able to take their old role again, but I think it could be really, really interesting, and a really fun nod if they took on different characters. Some of the ones that I've suggested before on like Patreon episodes is um, like what if Tom Felton played like Remus Lupin? I think he could nail it, and that like, and having that range of, oh, this was Draco, now it's Remus. Like that could be some really cool stuff that they could do. And I think there's at least a few, Tom Felton included, that would actually want to come back and be a part of this. So I don't know, like I said, but I don't know. I don't think I don't think that people I don't think that the the environment right now within the Harry Potter fandom is going to allow this TV series to be the success that it could have been at one time for sure. And that maybe it could be at some point that isn't right now. But I don't know. I don't think that it's going to I think those opposed are going to be so loud that it doesn't have the opportunity to be given any like benefit of the doubt or any leeway really. Um, I think it's possible that they pull the plug quick if there are if there's a lot of backlash against it. Um, and I think that's highly possible with where we are in the fandom. So that's why I think that it probably won't work. Even though there is a way that they could do it. And it'd be really cool if there wasn't so much outside noise that is relevant noise. Don't get like, I want to make that very clear. Like it is very relevant noise to the conversation. Like if if this thing tanks, it's not going to be without a direct line to JK's Twitter account. Like, she essentially would be sabotaging her own series and in the own fandom, that rallied around her work. I mean, that's the part of this that just, and I'm not gonna go down that road in this podcast. And uh, yeah, but as a about as neutral of a third party and new person, just like showing up to this as a grown adult, it's yeah. I don't see anything. Um, I there's not a lot welcoming at the moment for new Potter content, and I don't see how this thing survives it. But we'll see. I'm wrong several times a day, so I could be very much wrong about this. Thank you for listening to this episode of the podcast. I know it was a little bit different than what I've been doing with the chapter recaps, but some of the topic episodes that I've posted from when I've gone on to other podcasts, on where I go on their show and then they give me permission to post the episode on my feed as well. Some of those have seemed to have gotten a pretty a decent response in the download. So maybe you're just feeling a little more topical right now, and that's totally fine. We can revisit the chapters, um, down the road here if some of these topics really land for you. Um, like I said earlier, check out the YouTube videos. Those are really fun to do. So I'm really hoping that those catch on, because they're, like I said, they're really fun to do. They're really fun to write. They're fun to shoot. Um, I even don't hate editing them, which is also a plus. Um, if you're watching on YouTube, please hit the like button, subscribe. If you are listening on one of the many podcast apps out there, please leave a rating and review, and all of that. There's the website is a place to get links to literally all the things. Belatedbinge.com. I don't really know how else to sign off of this other than to just say, yeah, thanks. Bye.